Hi, everybody, and welcome into another 30 Minutes program here on WCMT. 30 Minutes is our community affairs program. We spend a half an hour each week talking with someone from our community or elsewhere with interest in our community or things that mean something to us. And today our special guest is Dr. Anton Garcia Fernandez. Dr. Garcia Fernandez is a Spanish professor at the University of Tennessee at Martin, born in Vigo in Spain, and after completing college in Spain, moved to the United States to pursue his Ph.D. in Spanish language and literature from Vanderbilt University in Nashville. But we're not here to talk about Spanish or speak in a language that you may or may not be able to understand or speak coherently. What we're here to talk about today is his other real passion, the life and the celebration of life since the passing of Bing Crosby. And Dr. Anton Garcia, aside from being very fluent in Spanish and several other languages, is also the American co-editor of Bing Magazine, which is the quarterly publication for the International Club Crosby, the longest-running fan club program in the world, as according to the Guinness Book of World Records. Dr. Garcia Fernandez, thank you for taking the time to join us today, and I appreciate you coming in and sitting down to talk with us.
I appreciate you having me, Kevin. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Before we get too far into Bing Crosby, because I know, again, it is a passion of yours, why don't you tell everyone just a little bit more about yourself, kind of a snapshot of who you are.
Well, I was born in Spain, as you said before. I've lived in Tennessee for a long, long time. I went to school at Vanderbilt University. That's the reason why I moved to Tennessee. Then at Vanderbilt, I met my wife, which was really a wonderful thing, and now the two of us live here in Martin, Tennessee. We have a 4-year-old daughter, and I teach Spanish at the university here in town. And besides that, I'm a huge fan of music and literature, particularly jazz music. And when you talk about jazz, one of the most important singers in jazz, believe it or not, and a lot of people don't know this, is Bing Crosby. So Bing Crosby has always been my hero. Has always been a personality that I've been attracted to because of the music and also because of his unique life. So I think that's what I would have to say then.
I think one of the first things that a lot of people would think of and would ask you is, how does a young boy in Spain get into, especially someone who was growing up in the 80s and 90s as you were, into American jazz, Bing Crosby, and music like that?
Well, I have to thank my dad for that. He is a huge book and record collector. He was a high school teacher for 42 years, now retired. And I was very lucky to grow up in a household where, I had books and records just pretty much everywhere. And his record collection is right now probably mounting up to about 15,000 records, and some of that is jazz. And I discovered through his record collection a lot of great jazz music, the music of Bill Evans, the music of Benny Goodman, the music of Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington. And so listening to all of these musicians growing up gave me an appreciation for jazz. And in the case of Bing Crosby, I discovered him more through the movies. But I realized as I started learning more about him, I was always attracted by his voice, his speaking voice, his singing voice. But I realized early on that his role in jazz and pop was beyond compare, really, in the 20th century. And so I became more and more interested in his life and career.
When people think of Bing Crosby, do you think we tend to lean more towards being the musician or being the actor?
Well, I think most people that know Bing Crosby know him because of his Christmas recordings, but that's just a small part of his recorded output, of his legacy. Definitely the best known part of it, but it's not the only one. I would even say it's not even the most important one, because actually Bing Crosby in the 1930s, his career began in the mid-20s, but in the 1930s he rose to prominence as a great crooner, as a singer that created a new style by melding the pop music of the day with jazz, and by singing songs not in a straight way, but with jazz nuances. And I think that, to me, that's the most important, contribution that Bing Crosby made to the music of the 20th century.
When you speak to a group of people who may enjoy music or like music, but may not be, obviously, as well-versed in the catalog of Bing Crosby, obviously, probably the first thing that anyone mentions is the Irving Berlin song, White Christmas. Several other Christmas tunes. The duet he does with David Bowie, Peace on Earth. One of my personal favorites, Mele Kalikimaka with the Andrews Sisters. Mm-hmm. Again, you see a lot of people who, and it's played every year. You know, we can't forget Bing's Christmas stuff because it's played every year. The difference between Christmas music and every other type of music that we hear, or I guess non-Christmas music, is that it doesn't necessarily get that same kind of refresh on an annual basis. What are some of his biggest hits that you would say that are not Christmas music, things that people might recognize that, oh, I didn't know Bing sang that?
Well, he recorded for the better part of 50 years. His career lasted for 5 decades. And so basically in the 1940s, most of the biggest hits that were recorded in that era, and also in the 30s, many of them were introduced by Bing Crosby. Songs by Johnny Mercer, songs like I'm an Old Cowhand from the Rio Grande, for example. You know, he was also a great ballad singer. Some of the Christmas songs he sings are ballads, but you know, he made some great records in that era. And you know, I'm thinking, for example, of you know, ballads that were huge hits during World War II. You know, like "I'll Be Seeing You." That's a great song that Bing recorded that he actually revived from an earlier record during World War II. Bing Crosby, pretty much anything that he sang on radio became a hit because Bing Crosby was one of the first, if not the first, media superstar. He was popular on records, in film, on radio, and later on TV. In the 1930s and 40s, he hosted the Kraft Music Hall, sponsored by Kraft Cheese, and the audiences, weekly audiences for this show, were counted in the tens of thousands. So basically, Bing Crosby was a familiar voice on the radio. Anyone who grew up during those years will remember him, and pretty much anything he sang on radio became a big hit.
Well, and you were talking about earlier his pioneering style, the melding of the jazz to the kind of smooth crooning that created a different style. It's not the only place that he was a pioneer. Bing Crosby is an exceptional person. There are other aspects to his life that we don't necessarily know about if we're not diehard fans that you can bring to life for us.
Yes, and I think one of the interesting things about Bing Crosby is that his image was pervasive over the span of his whole life. You know, he was an important person in, of course, the media, in records, but also, you know, he brought notoriety to the sport of golf because he was really interested in this sport. And then when it comes to actual developments, like, for example, the development of the magnetic tape for recording, that was something that Bing funded because he wanted better quality for his records. He also wanted to be able to pre-record his radio shows, to have more free time to do other things, like play golf, but other things too. You know, so thanks to Bing Crosby, really, we have magnetic tape because he funded the creation, the invention of that device. He was also a very shrewd businessman. He invested his money really well. And so he was part owner of the Pirates, the baseball team from Pittsburgh, even though he was not from Pittsburgh. And he also invested money, for example, on Minute Maid orange juice. He was one of the first to do that. He was always at the cutting edge of things like that. Going back to your question before about, you know, what songs I really like by Bing Crosby, one of my favorites is one that he made also during World War II. He was very active during those years, and he recorded a song that I think is one of the best songs that he ever did, with the Les Paul Trio, just guitars, and Bing Crosby singing a song called It's Been a Long, Long Time. That is a classic. That's one of my favorite songs that he ever did.
All right. And so many things there that wasn't aware of. One of the other things, and you and I discussed previously, is that he was also kind of a pioneer with the civil rights movements, and the things that he did to advance, I guess, the black musician. Is probably the best way to say that. Tell us a little bit about his work there.
Well, he doesn't get much credit for that, but you have to think that in a very segregated America, in the 1920s and the 30s, Bing was a superstar in the 1930s, and he was making records or appearing on radio with the likes of Louis Armstrong, who was a lifelong friend, and Duke Ellington, Louis Jordan, for example, just to name a few. He was very adamant that his friend Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, got equal billing as he did for the movie Pennies from Heaven, and we're talking about the late 1930s. That really is pioneering. He loved jazz. He loved the musicians that played that music, and he always wanted to record with them. He always wanted to record with the best, and he never cared about the color of the skin. He was a Catholic. He didn't care about the religious beliefs of these people. So in that way, Bing Crosby should be regarded as one of the pioneers of the civil rights movement, and that's something that doesn't get said very much, and most people don't know about.
You talked about Pennies from Heaven and talked about movies. Bing Crosby, the actor, probably almost as big as Bing Crosby, the musician. Obviously, Pennies from Heaven is one of those that we all know. The holiday movies, Holiday Inn, White Christmas, the classics with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. And I kind of wonder if they got together to make the movies because they loved to play golf together, or they started playing golf together because of the movies.
They were friends, and they just fed off of each other. And a lot of those Road to movies, Road to Bali, Road to Morocco, were off on the road to Morocco, you know. All of those were largely ad-libbed. You know, they just had this wonderful rapport, you know, on stage, off stage. They did a lot of USO tours together, for example, you know. So off stage, on stage, on camera, off camera, they were just really good friends. And that shines, I think. They were always trying to outdo each other in those movies. So if you watch the Road to movies that they made together, those are classics mostly, not because of the plot. I would even say in some cases not even because of the music, but because of the rapport between Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, who were always lashing out at each other in a kind of a really funny way.
Well, and when two actors have great chemistry, it always portrays itself onto the screen. You can see that without a problem. It's one of those things that really captures you and makes for a good movie. Joining us on the 30 Minutes program today, Dr. Anton Garcia Fernandez, Associate Spanish Professor at the University of Tennessee at Martin. But the real reason that we're here to talk today, he is the co-editor, the American co-editor of Bing Magazine. Bing is a quarterly publication for the International Club Crosby, which is the Bing Crosby fan club, the Guinness World Record-holding longest-running fan club in history, continuously running. And I want you to, I guess, tell me about the International Club Crosby.
It is a very interesting array of different people from different places in the world who love the music and the legacy of Bing Crosby and who share this passion with others by means of the club. The club began in the 1930s, and that's why, you know, with different ups and downs over the decades, but it's been going on all these years. We have members from all over the world, but mostly from Great Britain, Ireland, Canada, the United States, and Australia. And basically what we do is everything we can to promote the figure and the legacy, musical and otherwise, of Bing Crosby. We put out a quarterly magazine called Bing Magazine, and that's what I co-edit with Malcolm McFarlane, who is the British co-editor. And it's a magazine that's printed on glossy paper with nice pictures of Bing, and most of all, nice articles about Bing and news about him, and, you know, just anything that we can put in there to remember the legacy of Bing Crosby, which is vast in many different ways. And, you know, I've gotten to know very interesting people through the club. And, you know, I encourage everyone out there to find out more information about the club, particularly if they like jazz and if they like vocal jazz, or, of course, if they like the music of Bing Crosby.
Since you said that you encourage that, what's the website to become part of the International Club Crosby?
Actually, there's two ways. One of the websites is club-crosby.org, but you can also go to bingmagazine.co.uk, and you will have all the information that you need there about both the magazine and the different activities that the club carries out. We also put out CDs with old recordings of Bing Crosby that hadn't been available for a long time. We have even published or helped publish some books about Bing Crosby and, all the different musicians that he played with, producers that worked with him, and, all different things like that.
One of the, let me ask it this way. How long have you been part of the International Club Crosby?
Too many years to remember, really. But I have only been the co-editor for about a couple of years now.
Okay. You and I had discussed it. This all came up because there's an event coming up that I want you to share with everyone, because you want a good turnout and good participation, but it's because of something, again, that you enjoy, and you like to see people enjoy the things that you enjoy. Tell us what's coming up and the reason that you're doing what you're doing.
Well, Bing Crosby passed away in 1977 in Madrid, Spain. He had been playing a round of golf there with some friends. He loved playing golf in different countries. That's one of the things he liked to do the most in his free time. And he actually collapsed after playing golf in Madrid, Spain in 1977, and eventually passed away. So that has been, if you do the math, 40 years ago, right? And so the club is trying to honor and remember Bing Crosby on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of his passing, because usually the mainstream media, it kind of goes largely unnoticed. We remember Elvis Presley, who died just a couple of months before Bing on that same year. And you probably heard a lot about, Elvis and everything that's going on at Graceland. And I love Elvis, but you don't hear a lot about Bing Crosby. And so in order to remember him, to honor him, to raise more awareness about his career and his life, on December 7th, so on Thursday, December 7th at 5:45 at the C.U. Weldon Public Library in downtown Martin, yours truly is going to be there talking about Bing Crosby for about 15 minutes as an introduction to a free showing of the movie White Christmas with Vera Ellen, Rosemary Clooney, Danny Kaye, and Bing Crosby.
Well, and it's one of those movies that is quintessential Christmas. It's almost like the holiday season's not complete if you haven't seen it. So it's great that it's provided as a free opportunity and as a way to commemorate. I want to encourage anyone who's listening today that if you are anyway a fan of Bing Crosby or curious about his life, that Dr. Garcia Fernandez here has just such a wealth of information about Bing Crosby. Tapping into those resources while you're here, why don't you tell us some things that we may not know about Bing Crosby? Bing trivia, I guess, if you will.
Well, one of the things I would say about Bing Crosby is that he was such a large figure in American music that he influenced virtually every singer that came after. From Frank Sinatra to Dean Martin to Perry Como to Elvis Presley himself. One of the first songs that Elvis recorded at Sun Record Studio, 706 Union Avenue in Memphis, Tennessee, was a ballad that Bing Crosby had recorded called Harbor Lights. So even Elvis was influenced by Bing Crosby, even the Beatles. John Lennon remembered that before writing one of the career-defining songs by the Beatles in 1962, 1963, Please Please Me, he had been listening to a song by Bing Crosby called Please that more or less played with the double meaning of the word please in very much the same way that the Beatles played with the meaning of that word in Please Please Me, because the Bing Crosby song said something like, please lend a little ear to my pleas. So basically what I think is important is a lot of people don't realize how really and truly powerfully influential Bing Crosby was, not just as a singer, but just as a businessman, as a person, as a public figure, and that's something that I think needs to be remembered a little more.
Bing Crosby, born in 1903, passed away in 1977. Not born as Bing.
No.
His name was not Bing Crosby. Someone did not look at their child and think, we got a little baby Bing here. What's Bing Crosby's real name?
His real name was Harry Lillis Crosby, and he was born in Tacoma, Washington State in 1903 into an Irish Catholic family. And he became known as Bing early in his life. And it actually stuck, and he would keep the nickname as, a defining nickname for his stage persona. He used to like a comic strip that used to be published in the paper when he was a kid called the Bingville Bugle or something like that. I think that was what it was called, the Bingville Bugle. And he liked it so much that people started referring to him as Bing, Bing, Bing. And then it stuck, and he became not Harry Crosby anymore, but Bing Crosby. His brother Bob Crosby was also musically talented, and he led a big band in the 1930s and 1940s, Bob Crosby and the Bobcats, that made some really good Dixieland jazz music in the big band style.
Whenever you have someone who is such a large pop culture icon, as Bing was, and you think back to people like Elvis and John Lennon and folks like that who were so influential, and even actors in the same vein, you always wonder what their offspring have done. And I'm not asking you to go down through his family tree, but does he have any relatives who have made their way into pop culture, aside from his brother, that we might know today? Are there grandchildren of Bing Crosby that sing under the name of so-and-so that we might be aware of?
Well, Mary Crosby was on TV. She was an actress on TV in the late 70s and early 80s. That's a good example of somebody who was related to Bing that was in some form or fashion famous. His son Gary, with whom he had sort of a troubled relationship at times, was also a singer. And made some, I think, pretty interesting records, but not very well known in the 1950s. They have been reissued on CD, by the way, the records by Gary Crosby, and they're actually pretty interesting. But I think definitely his brother Bob Crosby was the most important, I would say, as far as fame is concerned. I remember a movie, I can't remember which movie it is, where Bob Crosby appears. It's one of those road movies, Road 2 movies with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. And they're in the middle of the jungle, and, out of the side comes Bob Crosby with a shotgun, and he just shoots in the air. And Bob says to Bing in the movie, "What was that?" And Bing Crosby says, "Oh, that was my brother Bob. I promised him a shot in this movie." And, it's a corny joke, obviously, but it's the kind of ad-lib nonsense that makes those movies really, really interesting. I just can never get enough of the partnership of Bing Crosby and Bob Hope.
Dr. Anton Garcia Fernandez, the Associate Professor of Spanish at the University of Tennessee at Martin and American co-editor of Bing Magazine, as part of his responsibility with International Club Crosby, here today to talk about the life of Bing Crosby, and, of course, to let everyone know that Thursday, December the 7th at 5:45 at the Weldon Library, there will be a showing of White Christmas to honor 40 years, the 40th anniversary of Bing Crosby's death. You have a passion for music. You have a passion for a specific style. You like the jazz. You like the big band. You like the Cream. You like the classic country. I'm going to give you an opportunity here because you do podcasts and you do blogs. If you want to share some information about that with everyone who may want to follow along, who may have a shared interest with you.
Yes, when I was at Vanderbilt studying my PhD, earning my PhD in Spanish from Vanderbilt University, I used to have a radio show there in Nashville on the now defunct station WRVU Nashville, where I played old country music. It was called Music City USA, and whenever I had the chance to do a replacement show, I would play big band music and the crooners on another show called Music City Bandstand. I'm talking about many years ago. I haven't had the chance here in town to revive this kind of a show. And so, in order to do something to further the music that I really like, the big band music, the jazz, and the crooners, I write 2 blogs regularly about jazz. One of them is called Jazz Flashes. You can find it at jazzflashes.blogspot.com. And another one is called The Vintage Bandstand, and you can find it at vintagebandstand.blogspot.com. And as far as the podcasts that I do, they have to do with literature, which is another one of my passions, and also with music. Some of them are in Spanish. A lot of them are in English as well, and you can find them on my YouTube channel, which you can find by going on YouTube and typing my name, Anton, A-N-T-O-N, and then G-F. And, you should be able to find a picture of me there, and all the different podcasts that I've done over the years, quite a few years now.
And, of course, we can't not mention the fact that you love soccer.
Oh, yes.
To the point that you referee soccer.
That's right. I love soccer and baseball and tennis. Those are my 3 favorite sports. I like golf as well, but not as much as Bing, and I don't play golf. But I have refereed soccer for the better part of 25 years, and I do that a lot around the area here, around Northwest Tennessee for the TSSAA. And it's really a fun experience. I get to meet a lot of different people out in the community, which I love, and I also get to help out with the development of soccer in the area, which I think has grown quite a bit in the 7 years that I have been here. So yes, you may see me out there wearing black or yellow or green and calling games. So, if I make a bad call, just think I'm a good person. Don't do anything to me. I'm doing my best.
And kind of here, I want to mention one more thing. I guess about 5 or 6 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, it was actually part of our news stories here. You received a grant, I believe is what it was, to do some extra work on something you're passionate about. With, again, I think it's literature and music. If you want to share a little bit about that work.
Yes, that was a grant that I got from the university, just a few $100 to buy some books that I needed in order to work on a project that I have been working on for a while on the Northwestern Spanish writer Álvaro Cunqueiro, who was one of the best writers, novelists, I believe, of the 20th century in Spain. And I'm trying to put together the first book on Álvaro Cunqueiro's complete novelistic production. So that's probably what you might have heard about, and I'm very proud to have received that. It's not really a lot of money, but it's enough for the project that I'm working on.
Well, as we're about out of time here, I'm going to give you another opportunity. Dr. Anton Garcia Fernandez joining us this week on 30 Minutes program, who the reason we're here today is to talk all about Bing Crosby and International Club Crosby and the event that's coming up this Thursday. Anything else that you want to share with us about Bing Crosby, and of course remind everyone again what the movie is showing in time and place and all of that good stuff?
Besides the fact that it's the time now to listen to Bing Crosby as a Christmas singer, he made some really great recordings. I would like to simply mention 3 records that I really like by Bing Crosby. One of them is called Bing with a Beat with Bob Scobie and his Frisco Jazz Band. This is from the 1950s. His collaboration called Bing Sings Whilst Bregman Swings with Buddy Bregman, and of course a record that he made in 1960 with his pal Louis Armstrong called simply Bing and Satchmo. Those are 3 really good records to listen to Bing Crosby as a jazz singer. As far as the movie showing, it's on December 7th, so on Thursday, December 7th at 5:45. I promise I won't talk too long. Just a little brief introduction, and then we will show the movie at the C. Weldon Public Library in downtown Martin. White Christmas. Make sure you make it if you can, because we're going to have door prizes. It's good family fun, and it really is a great movie with Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney, Danny Kaye, and Vera Allen.
And if you're interested in being a part of Club Crosby, you can check them out at it's club-crosby.org or bingmagazine.co.uk for more information on that. Dr. Garcia-Fernandez, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today here and talk about this. Hopefully that you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and that everyone else will enjoy it as much as I have as well. This is Kevin Bartholomew for WCMT's 30 Minutes pre-recorded.